Alright, thank you very much. Hello everybody, it's your good friend Pozzible here, and today we're going back in time to look at another movie that was really great and yet also forgotten through time and through the mishla of all the movies that are made recently. And today's forgotten classic is The Miracle of the White Stallions. Now this actually is a little controversial here because this is not an actual movie. I don't think it was ever really released in theaters. It's on DVD right now. And The Miracle of the White Stallions was actually part of the Disney Sunday, Disney in Living Color or something like that. The Wonderful World of Color is what they had, but I forget. It's not that. That's not what it's called now. The Wonderful World of Color is what they call, is what happens at California Adventure. Okay, this was part of their television program, and every Sunday they had like these made-for-TV movies, and this was one of them, The Miracle of the White Stallion. So because it was a made-for-TV movie, I count it as a movie, and a very good movie at that. Very different movie because this one was held closer to the chest of what actually happened, and it was truer form to what actually could have happened back in those days. This wasn't something that was embellished too much. You know, they wanted everything to be real, everything to be happening as it happened. And you're going to have to forgive me because I got to admit, as I start to explain this, I'm going to be butchering some of these names. If any of you know me, you know I'm not very good with foreign pronunciations. I'm not good with pronunciations anyway. But the point is that I'm going to try my best to do these people and these horses honor by explaining to them the best I can. The white horses. These are a huge thing in Spain and Vienna, okay? And especially Vienna, I should say, because basically you're looking at the best trained horses in the world. Even to this day, they exist, and their legacy is incredible. If you ever have a chance, even on Netflix right now, there's a documentary based on their existence. The documentary really wasn't that great. I was hoping for more of the history, but they really didn't go too deep into the history. They had a touch of history with more of the modern day experience of these horses, which is fine. I guess if that's what they wanted, that's cool. But I wanted more of the history, and that's what this was. This was more of the history. Their lead colonel, you have to remember, this is Spain. It's Vienna. This is near the end of a war that this is happening. So even though the war effort is starting to fall apart, Germany is trying to push so that they can succeed. And these guys, here's the funny part, okay? You got to understand something. These guys are Nazis. Not Nazis like, Hitler and his guys were, but they were forced into service to work with the Nazis so that their city would be safe. And then they would keep the peace and keep things in order. He has a really good friend that he works with. He has a Gestapo agent that he's against. And his only goal, and who is this guy? The Colonel Elios, and I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name because I'm just going to butcher that last name. But Colonel Elios, his job is to protect the school because he was the head of the school even before the Nazi occupation. But because of his military standing, he was drafted into the military, and it didn't really matter. So what if he was a Nazi while he looked over his horses? He was still just looking over the horses. And remember, this is 1963. So anyway, that when this movie was made, it was 1944 when it was represented. He realized, though, that during the bombing, as the Allies were coming through and starting to bomb people and starting to shake up the German Empire, his horses were in danger. So he wanted desperately to take them out. The Gestapo guy says no, his friend says yes in a very creative way. And his friend was somebody you really liked, despite the hardship in his ultimate destiny. He played a very good character, especially, and it's really hard because all of these guys are in Nazi uniform. But there were those moments where they realized that you had those moments where it's like, we wear this uniform, but we are not Nazis. Those kind of moments. Nothing like you would see today, but they did it right. And that was the important part. Like I said, in this movie, unlike other movies, like say, Monuments Men, I felt like this history for the White Stallions was held closer to the chest and was more real to what actually happened than what Monuments Men presented. Monuments Men I liked. But the problem I had with it is that it was like this Cliff Notes version of Monuments Men. You couldn't get a grasp of the whole story. And of course, the killer about Monuments Men is that at the end of the movie, George Clooney had to have his moment where he could, rise above the whole Nazi tyranny and everything and sit in front of a Nazi officer and get him to tell him what was in the salt mine that they were about to blow up. The funny thing is, when you think about it, they were in this area that the Russians were going to take over. And that was not even close to the reality of the history of that time. They were in an area where the Russians weren't going to occupy. That was solely American territory. But because they had to add some angst, because you had to have this, shining moment where they were able to succeed where others would have failed type of thing, they had to create this drama around this cave that was supposed to have all this stuff in it. And it did. But it was a race against time, but it really wasn't, because that was our territory. We were there, we were going to stay there. The Russians weren't moving in, but they had to create that idea like they could have, just so that these, especially George Clooney could have his shining moment. Don't get me wrong, I like the movie Monuments Men, but you could tell where they embellished the history to make it more Hollywood. Not so much the case with Miracle of the White Stallions. There's three major components of this movie. There's the slow introduction, where he's trying to get the horses out. There's the second part, where they're supposed to be in safety, and yet at the same time they're not really safe because they have a different kind of threat. And the third part, where they have to, because they have the stallions, now they have to go rescue the mares. And if you don't have the mares, this breed will die out, and they will all be gone. But luckily, the mission happened, if you read the history, exactly like the mission actually happened. If Hollywood were to make this movie today, they would have the leader, Colonel Elios, they would have him leading the charge to save the mares and killing all the Nazis along the way and stuff like that. I exaggerate a little bit, but you get the idea. So I like this movie. It wasn't fast-paced, don't get me wrong. It wasn't overly exciting. It had its slow moments, but it had real deep moments. It was a very intelligently done show, and I think one of the reasons why it was so well done is because the guy who wrote the book was still alive when they made this movie. He still had 10 years to go after they made this movie. So I'm sure he consulted with them. They had a good book, they had a great story, and they told an important part of history that was forgotten. These white horses are truly history, living history, because they've been around for over 500 years, I believe. These are old war horses, but now they're show horses. They love what they do, they know what they're a part of, and they're very smart. And they can do amazing things. Nowadays, I would imagine if some people were to watch these dancing horses, they wouldn't see them as exciting as they actually are. But the one question you got to ask yourself is, when can you really see a horse do what they really do? These horses go through 10, 20 years of training, And I'm not at the beginning. I'm saying, first 4 or 5 years before they get ready. 4 or 5 years, then they're on the show. But after that, they can keep going for a while, and just to master this one technique. What's the technique? Well, you have to watch the show to understand what I'm talking about. And I want to say them by their name. It begins with an L. I do know the word, but my pronunciation abilities. I can't say it properly, so I'm not going to dishonor them by trying to express their name. I'm going to say it just once, just to try. It's the Liechtenstein, not Liechtenstein. You understand now my problem. I trip over that. But yeah, they're a good horse, they're a good breed, it's a great story, and I do give it very much a see it. I think you'll enjoy it. Alright guys, that's it for me for today. We'll see you at the theaters.